They say that in any marriage, the most dangerous secrets are the ones that are never spoken. They live in the quiet spaces between words, in the averted glances, in the conversations that are deliberately avoided. For the first 3 years of my marriage to David, our home was filled with a beautiful, comfortable silence. But then a new silence began to grow. A cold, heavy silence that emanated from a single object, a dark oak box, locked and hidden on the highest shelf of his workshop. And for 2 years, the unspoken secret of that box became a ghost that haunted every room of our house and every corner of my mind. To understand the darkness that came later, you must first understand the light. Meeting David was like coming home to a place I'd never been before. He was a carpenter, a man of quiet strength and incredible talent. His hands, though calloused and strong, could create things of delicate, breathtaking beauty. He wasn't a man for grand speeches or flowery compliments. His love language was tangible. It was in the sturdy dining table he built for us where we'd share our meals. It was in the smooth, hand-carved rocking chair where I'd read for hours. It was in the way he could fix anything that was broken, with a patience and focus that made me feel like the safest woman in the world. Our life was a tapestry of simple, perfect moments. The smell of sawdust and fresh coffee in the mornings, the easy rhythm of working side by side in the garden, the way he'd trace the lines on my palm with his thumb as we fell asleep. He was my anchor, my steady ground in a chaotic world. I believed I knew him completely. I believed we had no secrets. The change began like a hairline crack in a perfect piece of porcelain, almost invisible at first, but destined to spread. He started spending more and more time in his workshop. At first, I thought nothing of it. It was his sanctuary, the place where he was most himself. But the hours grew longer, stretching late into the night. He'd come to bed long after I was asleep, and he'd carry a strange scent with him. It wasn't the clean, sharp smell of pine or the chemical tang of varnish. It was a faint, musty smell, like old books and dust, and something that reminded me of dried flowers. He began to drift away from me, even when he was sitting right beside me. We'd be having dinner, and I'd be telling him about my day, and I'd see his eyes lose focus, his mind traveling to some distant, inaccessible place. The comfortable silences we once shared became heavy, pregnant with questions I was too afraid to ask. He was becoming a stranger in the house we had built together. My heart, desperate for an explanation, began to write its own story. A familiar, ugly, and heartbreaking story. My narrative had a villain, a woman from his past, and the locked oak box became the sacred vault where her memory was kept. I started to imagine what was inside. Faded love letters tied with a silk ribbon, a pressed flower from a first date, a lock of her hair, a photograph of a woman with a smile more radiant than mine, a woman he had truly loved, a woman he was still mourning. I became convinced that our life, our home, our marriage was a second choice, that I was a comfortable epilogue to a much grander love story that he couldn't bear to let go of. This idea became a poison, seeping into every part of our life. Every time he was quiet, I assumed he was thinking of her. Every time he retreated to his workshop, I pictured him holding her picture, comparing me to her, and finding me wanting. I began to resent the beautiful things he built, seeing them not as gifts of love, but as acts of penance for a heart he couldn't give me. I found myself watching him, searching for clues. One afternoon, I saw him through the workshop window. he wasn't working. He was just standing there, holding the box, his head bowed. The look on his face was one of such profound, gut-wrenching grief that it took my breath away, and it confirmed my worst fears. He was grieving a ghost, and I was married to a man who was in love with a memory. The breaking point was our 5th anniversary. He had been a whirlwind of activity in his workshop for weeks, the sounds of sawing and sanding filling the air. That morning, he presented me with his gift. It was an exquisite jewelry box crafted from rare cherry wood with my initials, a swirling, intricate A for Anna, carved into the lid. It was, objectively, the most beautiful thing he had ever made. And as I held its perfect, polished weight in my hands, my heart felt like a stone.
This beautiful box was a lie, a consolation prize, a beautifully crafted apology for the real box, the one on the top shelf, the one that held his heart. That night, I reached a decision. I could not spend another day living with this ghost. I could not compete with a memory. I needed the truth, even if it meant destroying the fragile illusion of our marriage. I waited until I heard the shower running. My hands were slick with nervous sweat as I slipped into the cool, sawdust-scented air of his workshop. I felt like a criminal, a spy in my own home. I found the small, ornate key he kept hidden in an old tin of mismatched screws. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet room. I climbed the stepladder, my movements clumsy with fear and adrenaline. I reached up and carefully took down the box. It was heavier than I expected, solid and real. I sat on the cold concrete floor, the box in my lap, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. I was about to open Pandora's box, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that our life would never be the same. The key turned in the old lock with a small, metallic click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I braced myself. I prepared my heart for the sight of another woman's handwriting, for the face of my rival.
I lifted the lid, and my world stopped. There were no letters. There was no photograph of a beautiful lover. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded dark blue velvet, was a single, tiny, white leather baby shoe. It was worn with a small scuff on the toe. Beside it lay a small plastic hospital bracelet, the name printed on it too faded and smudged to read, but the date was stark and clear. A date from 10 years ago. There was a small silver locket tarnished with age, and underneath it all, a single folded photograph. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. This wasn't evidence of an affair. This was something else entirely. Shaking, I picked up the photo. It was a picture of a much younger David, his face so open and filled with a pure, unadulterated joy that it made my chest ache. He was looking down at a woman with a gentle, loving smile, and she was cradling a tiny, sleeping baby wrapped in a pink blanket. This wasn't a lost love. This was a lost life. This was a family. I was still sitting on the floor, the impossible truth of these objects scattered around me, when the workshop door creaked open. David stood there, wrapped in a towel, his hair wet from the shower. He saw me, then his eyes dropped to the open box. The look on his face was not anger. It was an expression of such raw, wounded devastation that it felt like I had physically struck him. It was the look of a man
whose most private, sacred wound had just been ripped open. He didn't yell. He just slowly sank to the floor across from me, buried his face in his hands, and a sound I had never heard before, a broken, choked sob, escaped his lips. And then the story poured out of him, the words he had kept locked away for a decade. The woman was his first wife, Eleanor. The baby was their daughter, Lily. They had been married for 2 wonderful years, and Lily was their whole world. 10 years ago, 3 months after Lily was born, a drunk driver ran a red light. David woke up in a hospital bed with a broken leg and a concussion. He never saw them again. His entire universe, his past, his present, his future, had been incinerated in an instant. He hadn't told me, not because he didn't trust me, but because he was terrified. He was terrified that his tragedy would become the defining feature of our relationship. He didn't want to be the widower. He didn't want me to feel like I was living in the shadow of his perfect lost family. He loved me so fiercely, he told me, that he wanted to give me a clean slate, a love story that wasn't born from ashes. The box wasn't a shrine he worshipped at. It was a coffin for a life he never got to live, a life he had to pack away in order to find the strength to build a new one. All his late nights, his silent moods, his distant gazes, they coincided with the anniversaries. Her birthday, Lily's birthday, the day of the accident. He wasn't retreating from me. He was retreating into a cavern of grief so vast and dark, he didn't know how to ask me to enter it with him. He was trying to protect me from it.
The jewelry box he'd made me? He'd started it the day after the 10-year anniversary of the accident. It was his way of clawing his way back to the present, his way of building something beautiful and alive for me. I looked at my husband, this quiet, steady man, and I saw him for the first time. Not as the man who was keeping secrets from me, but as a man who had survived an unimaginable loss and had somehow found the courage to love again. All my petty jealousies, my self-doubt, my invented stories of betrayal, they all burned away, leaving behind a profound, humbling wave of love and empathy. I didn't say anything. I just reached out, my hand covering his. I carefully picked up the tiny baby shoe, its leather soft and worn, and gently placed it back in the box. That night, we didn't just talk. He introduced me to them. He told me that Eleanor loved to sing off-key in the car. He told me that Lily had a tiny little birthmark shaped like a crescent moon behind her ear. We sat on the floor of his workshop until the sun came up, and we cried together. We cried for the beautiful life he had lost, and for the 2 years we had lost to a silence that was born, not of betrayal, but of a deep, protective, and misguided love. The box is still on the shelf, but it isn't locked anymore. It's not his secret to carry alone. It's our history. The ghosts are still there, but they are no longer haunting us. They are a part of the foundation of our story. I had thought the truth would destroy us, but I was wrong. It was the only thing that could truly begin to build us.